The goal of a Kaizen event, it can be different depending on what you're trying to do. And sometimes when you're doing Kaizen events internally, a lot of the goal, part of the reason you're doing it is to train the operators as well.
Okay.
So you're looking for improvements to the bottom line of the business, right? But you also want to improve the people as well so that they learn, they understand what's going on, and they can make their own changes in the future.
Thanks for being with us. I was super excited when you said yes, because we met previously in your past job, and you have an extensive experience in lean and in tier one, mainly tier one suppliers in automotive for what, 20 years almost?
Yeah, I've been working since 2000.
You are with Shoplogix, super interesting software. I'll let you explain a little bit what it is and what you do there, because you probably do it better than I would.
So I worked for 15 years in automotive, and now I work for Shoplogix. And Shoplogix is a company that does machine monitoring, but more than machine monitoring. What we do is we take the signal of a machine, and then we create all kinds of analytics behind that. So when I worked in the automotive industry, we also use this Shoplogix to monitor our injection molding machines and our assembly machines. And what it really does is we can create a lot of visual displays based on the cycle time of the machine. So with one signal from the machine that says we made a part, we made another part, we made another part, all we need is that one signal to generate what the cycle of the machine is. Now, if the target cycle time is 30 seconds, and we see a part every 30 seconds, then we can create a dashboard that says, okay, you're on target, right? First hour, you made this many parts. Second hour, you made this many parts, and you're ahead, you're behind, right? So when you start to see the machine not sending the signal anymore, now the machine is down, right? So it's like a whiteboard beside the machine where an operator would write down every hour how many parts they've made, except we've automated that. And then after the fact, you can create all kinds of reports. So that's what Shoplogix does, and it really drives the same improvements that you would do as a CI person, as I was doing in automotive.
What is your definitions of Kaizen event?
Yeah, so what does Kaizen mean? And Kaizen is really just the Japanese word for continuous improvement, right? And so at its core, Kaizen means just a small improvement or an improvement. And Toyota doesn't have Kaizen events because in Japan and where Toyota developed Lean, Kaizen is a part of their culture. So they just do Kaizen as part of their job. But as that's kind of developed into North America, we've kind of bunch that all together. So these Kaizens, a small Kaizen could be, adding a floor mat over here or moving a box closer to the operator. That's a Kaizen, right? But a Kaizen could also be creating a complicated delivery system for material replenishment, right? That's also a Kaizen. So as we, in North America, as we kind of got onto this theme of Kaizen and we're trying to implement it, we created these events. And a Kaizen event is really a focused Kaizen improvement. So it's focused on a specific area or a specific process, and we get a group of people together and we try to do as many Kaizens as we can, basically. And we do that by looking at the current process and then analyzing that process and trying to identify where we can make improvements. And at the end of the day or at the end of the couple days for this Kaizen event, we're going to have a large improvement that consists of many, many, many small improvements. And that's really the nature of a Kaizen event. And a Kaizen event is really a lot of Kaizens, right? That's really what it is. So that's my kind of idea of what a Kaizen is.
We hear a lot of people trying to book a weekend and try to get out of the week. Well, what are the different time frame you've experienced for Kaizen events? Yeah,
Kaizen events can be timed many different ways. There can be different durations. I think the most common one is a week. A week can be a very big impact on the production activity, right? Because you need to still also make production. So sometimes a week doesn't make sense. In my experience, I've usually done 2 days. And during those 2 days, the production process is still running, right? So when you do a Kaizen activity, you have a group of people and you're going to analyze the process. So that process needs to run. So we have a work cell, they're assembling parts. We want to watch how that work cell operates. So we want that process to be running. Not 100% of the time, because you also need the time to stop the process and make the changes. So a lot of times people will spend multiple days because they can overnight make some changes that we can, test the next day. So for me, having a 2-day event is kind of, it's a hybrid Kaizen where you can do it fast, but you still have some time in between to make some changes. So usually the first day we do a lot of analysis, and then the second day we implement the changes that we've identified, talked about, and we test them out. If you went on for a longer period of time, for a week, then you could probably standardize and sustain a lot of those changes if you wanted to, and try to formalize them a little bit more. But usually, in my experience, we will let that for after the Kaizen, where we could, maybe go back a week later and just make sure that some of those things that we were not able to implement should have been implemented in the next week or so.
Okay. From what you remember, do you remember especially one Kaizen event that you came back to home and you said, okay, that was a good one. I'm really proud of what we achieved. And why? What are the output that would allow you to say that?
As far as results to the bottom line go, one Kaizen event that really sticks in my mind is one where we had 2 operators working on 2 different machines, but it was one work cell, right?
Okay.
And this is kind of a cultural thing where when you make a machine, you need an operator to use that machine.
Yeah.
So when we create a work cell, the designers design 3 machines, and we need 3 operators. But when you look at it, you identify that those operators are not balanced, right? One is going, so we have one machine that's very slow and the operator is waiting for it to finish, and the other operator has got a lot of manual work where the machine is very fast and it's not actually doing anything. The operator is doing most of the work outside the machine, right? So they're preparing the part, they're putting some stickers on it or whatever, right? So we looked at this work cell and we said, look, analyzing this process, we can see one operator can run 2 machines, and everyone's just surprised. They're like, this doesn't make sense. We can't have one operator with 2 different machines because it's always one operator with one machine. That's just how it works, right? And we're like, okay, but let's try it and see how it works, right? This machine has taken a long time. So while it's running, go work on the other machine, right? And it's just, at the end of the day, we have one operator doing the same process that 2 operators were doing before, and they're not really working any harder, right? They're just not waiting for that machine, right? So it's a bit of a respect for the employee as well, for the operator, where they just stand there and wait for the machine. You don't want your life to be governed, by a machine. You want to be the one driving the machine.
Right.
So stepping away from the machine and going to do some other work while the machine does its own thing, that's fine, right? Let's look at the work and how the part goes through the process. So for me, that was a big shift, because it made an improvement in that one work cell, but it also changed the way people thought about all the other work cells, right?
Okay.
Like, we don't have to have one operator and one machine. We don't have to wait for the machine to finish. We can do other things, right? So
that's a good one. For sure, it was pretty easy to calculate to demonstrate the ROI after and be able to do more Kaizen events after this one, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was definitely satisfying in that regard as well, because it's something that's very visible and easy to see as well, right?
Exactly.
Like, there used to be one person, there used to be 2 people, and now there's one person, right? So the goal of a Kaizen event, it can be different depending on what you're trying to do. And sometimes when you're doing Kaizen events internally, a lot of the goal, part of the reason you're doing it is to train the operators as well.
Okay.
So you're looking for improvements to the bottom line of the business, right? But you also want to improve the people as well, so that they learn, they understand what's going on, and they can make their own changes in the future, without having a special event to do it again. So it's kind of a hybrid between the training portion of it and, the actual implementation and seeing the actual improvement. So when you think about what the result is, you want to see a positive result to the bottom line, but you also want to see happy and engaged employees, right? And they're usually not mutually exclusive. So when you have a happy employee, then you've done something good for them, and they've identified some problems in their area, and you've solved those problems during the course of your Kaizen event. So they were struggling with something, they had to move around too much, they're always complaining about things that they've been talking about for 20 years that no one's ever done anything about. Right. And now we've had a group of people, we've done something about it. So they're going to be a little bit happier.
But I guess it's not always like that, where it's obviously when you come to upper management, say, they would ask you, hey, what did you guys did the last 2 days? It's not always obvious, I would say. Or
No. There's some Kaizen events that you don't get an immediate ROI from. Right. Sometimes I've done probably 5 or 10 different Kaizen events that are focused on 5S. Right. Okay. And 5S is helpful. It cleans up the work cell, but you don't always see an impact right away on the the cycle of the process. Right. Mm-hmm. It makes the job a little bit easier because you have a cleaner work cell. You have you have visual controls. You have everything in the right place. So definitely there's an improvement, but it's not necessarily a bottom line improvement. Right. But overall, when you do those types of things, they do add up over time. So you will see the bottom line improvement as you do more and more of those.
Let's say I'm a young manufacturing engineer. I'm getting into my first Kaizen in the next following days. Do you have any good advice?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a big challenge. And when I first started leading Kaizen events, one thing to really get away from is trying to fix the problem yourself. So I'm an engineer. When I go in there, I see the problem, or I think I see the problem, and I want to solve it right away. But we're here as a team, right? And the operators that are doing the process, they probably know the process. They definitely know the process much better than you, right? So you might have an idea of how to solve the process, but they probably have a better idea. Okay, they may not know it yet, right? So the idea is to not come in with too many preconceived notions where you're like, this is what we're going to do. But if you think, what you want to do is find those, the truth behind it, right? So do your time studies and let the operators decide whether that is a good idea or not, right? If we're going to go from 2 to 1, or if this is more balanced than the other, it's going to reveal itself as you look at the current situation, right? So that's one thing I would say is try not to come in with too much of your own agenda, and ask the right questions so that the operators can come up with those solutions on their own.
And you probably went through a couple reluctant employees who probably said, hey, is this the flavor of the month, another flavor of the month thing? Or how did you deal with that? Do you have any good story to share? Or?
Yeah, choosing the team is an important part of having a Kaizen event, right? Because you want to have the people that are involved in the process, but you can't have everybody, right? Exactly. So you need a representative sample. So for me, a good size of a Kaizen team is usually between 5 and 10 people, depending on how big the process is, right? I like to work with 5 if I'm just working with like one work cell. You have maybe one person from each shift. And you try to get good representatives, right? So that for example, it is one person from each shift. So if you have 3 shifts, they're going to have to change their, schedule a little bit so that they come in at the right time, right? But then they can convey the information to the rest of the people on their shift. So there's a bit of ownership on each shift. And then at the same time, you also want to have maybe a supervisor or lead involved, and then someone from outside, right? Outside the area. Could be a completely different area, could be the same area, but maybe a different work cell, that kind of thing, so that they can learn, because eventually this kind of process is going to come into their area as well. So they have a bit of a experience, they can spread the gospel a little bit to their own area and say, it's not that bad, they're doing good things, So, and also it's a perspective thing, right? When you have people in the work cell, they've always done it the same way, right? But if you bring someone from outside, they have a different perspective. They're like, well, why do you do it that way, right? And then you start to think about different ways, potential ways to do the process, right?
And as a Kaizen leader, what's your role?
The role of a Kaizen leader is, a lot of people use the term facilitator, because you don't want to make the change yourself. You want to facilitate. So you want to lead it. You want to make sure everyone's on the right track. Make sure that you're not straying from ultimate goal, right? And give them all the resources that they need. So if you want to make a change, you have the authority to make that change. Okay, you can try, build a little table really quick, or you have a maintenance person involved. You can make that happen because you're the facilitator, right? So you're the one that can go to management and say, this is what we're going to do, and they're going to approve it, right? So your goal is your role is really to make sure that there's no roadblocks and no obstacles, but also make sure that they're following the right lean kind of approaches and techniques, so right. that the process is optimized according to the larger, strategic vision of the business, right? So, just because you're making it go faster, what does that do downstream, right? If the work cell's producing 300 parts an hour, but the customer only wants, 200 parts an hour, then what have you accomplished, right? So you have to keep those, you have to understand the larger strategic vision as well, and make sure that the team understands that. So that's part of it for sure.
Any common pitfalls you've seen over the years, preparing a Kaizen, or after or during?
One common pitfall is you want to make sure that management is also involved, but not involved, but approves of the change that you're going to make. So I worked in a company recently where we had to do some Kaizen activities that were directed from the top, from the very top. But the supervisor or the manager of the area in assembly, he was not on board. Okay, so we tried to do a 2-min replenishment system in an assembly cell, and we went through all the process. We analyzed how many parts we needed for each part, so that we could stock the appropriate amount. And then when one bin was finished, the guy would bring another one. So we had these signals all set up. But 3 weeks later, it had all fallen apart, and they had a whole skid of parts in the area, and it was a big mess. And the reason was the manager of the area did not want to do it. And he did not receive enough, I guess, pressure from direct management from the top, but also from the bottom, which could be my fault as well as a facilitator, say this is the benefit. But we did struggle there, and the change didn't stick, right? So it's important that the manager is on the same page, so that, it's their area, so you cannot just go in there and change everything without their approval, right?
Right.
It can happen.
Oh, that's good. Very good. Hey, thanks again, Martin, for doing that. Very appreciated.